بِلِسَانِي يَفْقَهُوا قَوْلِي. In the name of Allah, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy, and prayers and blessings be on his beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's really exciting to be talking about dynamic masajid when the masjid's empty because of Omicron. So alhamdulillah for virtual masajid and for the office space that or the masjid space and the community spaces that we can actually continue to create online. And even if we're all watching at home, and most people are at home, alhamdulillah, for the ability to do that, it's not as exciting as when we're all together, but alhamdulillah that we can all stay safe, protect our loved ones, protect our community, etc. Alhamdulillah. So hopefully, if we're talking about masajid, I really wanted to start off first with the original community that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba built. And very early on in Islamic history, when the Prophet ﷺ first started receiving the message, there was Dar al-Arqam in Mecca, and then there was the community that they built in Medina. And I was hoping to actually focus on the community they built in Medina. And we were talking about this yesterday in our campus halaq, alhamdulillah. But towards the end of the Prophet ﷺ's time in Mecca, he started doing da'wah with the tribes that are coming into Mecca during Hajj. And there's the famous story of him meeting the 6 young men from the Khazraj, and then hearing the Prophet ﷺ, and they said, oh, this is the Prophet that we hear about from the Jewish scripture, and they believe in the Prophet ﷺ. And then the oldest one in the group, a young man by the name of As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu, he's 18 years old, and he tells the Prophet ﷺ, he tells him, if you come with us now, you'll be the leader of the Khazraj, and we have a horrible civil war. And we don't want you to be the leader of just one of the tribes, we want you to be a leader of both tribes. And As'ad ibn Zurara was one of these people that are in a very unique position, because his father is from the Khazraj and his mom is from the Aus. And the civil war between these two tribes, and each of his parents is part of the warring tribes. So he's a vested interest in ending the civil war that's happening in his city. And they come back the next year during Hajj, and he comes back, and the second time they were there were 10 from one tribe, 2 from the other tribe. But what they agreed upon was essentially that the Prophet ﷺ would come and they would try to heal the issues that they had in their society. And this is fundamentally what the Prophet ﷺ went to do in Medina, and this is why the people of Medina over everyone else took him in. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. In that first year, the Prophet ﷺ sends Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu anh as his ambassador to go be the person that is going to do da'wah, that's going to teach people about Islam, that's going to tell them what this new message is. And Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu anh, he was someone that he went to travel to Abyssinia, he migrated to Abyssinia, so he had experience with different kinds of people, he was very eloquent, he was someone that was really, really good at what he did, and he had memorized all of the Quran that had been revealed to that point. And if you look at this pairing of As'ad ibn Zurara and Mus'ab ibn Umayr, Mus'ab ibn Umayr had all of the text, and As'ad ibn Zurara had all of the context of Medina. Dr. Sherman Jackson talks about this in a really fascinating way, where he talks about humanness. There's what is it, the essence of it to be human, but then when it comes to reality, there's no theoretical humanness that exists outside of an actual human being. And that actual human being is a particular. So how do you take the universal and the particular? So yes, we're talking about Islam, and we're talking about Muslims, and we're talking about community spaces, but for us to do that, we have to understand, one, the context of our community space, and we all have the same text. SubhanAllah. So if we think about, and the reason I really love this pairing, Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu anh would go around and he's doing da'wah, and As'ad ibn Zurara is like, this is so-and-so. Make sure, the stakes are high on this one. And Mus'ab ibn Umayr would talk to people, and sometimes they come at him very combative, what are you doing? They're in the middle of a civil war. These are not people that are, in a relaxed state. They're in a very tense state, and he's there trying to heal them, and trying to tell them, hey, if we follow this new way, and we follow this new messenger, we can put down our arms and stop killing each other. And we can all live up to something that's bigger than all of us. So he is selling them something that is hopefully very, very exciting for all of them. And alhamdulillah, they do. And within that year, 1/3 of Medina becomes Muslim. This is before the Prophet ﷺ gets there. And when we think of the functions of the masjid, we oftentimes think of the space. But reality is the masjid is the people in the masjid and not the actual physical walls. The masjid is not the walls, the masjid is the people inside of the walls of the masjid that come to the masjid. And even now, if we're far away and we're watching on a live stream, it's still the people that make up our masjid community. It's still not just a physical space. Before the Prophet ﷺ made it to Medina, he had commanded Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu anhu to start Jum'ah. The very first Jum'ah that happened in the history of Islam, this is the biggest gathering we have in our masajid, was led by Mus'ab ibn Umayr in the house of As'ad ibn Zurara radiallahu anhu. These people that had a civil war were willing to come to his house because they were all related to him one way or another. And Mus'ab ibn Umayr was there teaching them. And this happened about 1.5 to 2 years before the first physical masjid in the history of Islam was built by Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu anhu, and it was actually built in Quba as the Prophet ﷺ is doing the migration. The reason I'm mentioning this, if something is hurting a member in our community, if someone came into the masjid, took a sledgehammer, started taking out one of the walls, everyone would stop them. Right? Everyone would figure out a way of like, get the sledgehammer out of this person's hand. They're hurting our masjid. And yet somehow we see ills in our masjid of like people that are backbiting. You took a sledgehammer to a member of our community. And yet we think twice before we stop someone from doing that. We witness racism in our masjid, and we don't necessarily stop the person. May Allah never make us people that see dhulm, see oppression, and just sit there idly by. May Allah protect us from that. But when we see these things, really try to imagine the people in the masjid are far more important than the walls of the masjid are ever going to be. Subhanallah. So that's in terms of what wallahu alam, what I think the masjid is from our prophetic example. The example of the Prophet ﷺ. Now what is the context of America? And when we look at the history of Islam in America, the history of Islam in America started long before any of us got here. So when Trump was like, I'm going to ban the Muslims from coming, the biggest migration of Muslims to America was actually enslaved people. You're 400 years too late, dude. Also, you fundamentally dehumanized all of the Muslims that came before us. As believers, we don't do that to our own brothers and sisters. Even if the society dehumanized them, we don't do that because we're here as a response to their dua. We were just talking how my husband and I lived in Cincinnati for 10 years. We don't have any family in Cincinnati. Like, actually how we ended up there for like so long that I was like, Ya Allah, how did I end up here? And I remember there was a movie, I'm sure some of you have watched it, Prince Among Slaves. It was a young man by the name of Abdurrahman who was enslaved, who spoke 8 languages. He was a genius. He was so well educated. And he went through, like you watch the movie going through all of his trials and tribulations, and he swims across the Ohio River, and he's in Cincinnati's Underground Railroad, and that's the first time he's free. And I remember watching that movie and all of a sudden realizing we're all here because as soon as he got here, he made dua. It's the only reason any of us are here. And this is our legacy. SubhanAllah, when I went to Sierra Leone and I met the Sierra Leone Council of Imams, and I was telling them, and I was like, yeah, we're here because of their du'as, and they're like, oh, cute American who doesn't know anything. And they're like, that's not the first Muslim. The first Muslim was our king, Mansa Abu Bakr, alayhi rahmatullah, who was Mansa Musa's older brother. If you've never heard of Mansa Musa, he was the richest man that ever lived. He dropped off enough gold in Egypt and sadaqah that he ruined Egypt's economy for 20 years because gold didn't mean anything. Everybody had it. Subhanallah. His older brother traveled west and he landed in Brazil. And the story is, just so that I'm disclosing all of the information, this story is very much contested in academic circles where academic circles don't accept it. My 2 cents is because there were no white people to say that happened and that's why they're saying it didn't happen. The West Africans know when their king traveled west. So I'm going to take their oral history, and I think their oral history is just as valid as any other history book that you could have possibly ever read. But the history of Islam in America, when we talk about the majority of Muslims in America right now, I think it was 58% of them were born outside of America, 42% born in America. So even if we're the majority now, we never deny our history. We're here because of the dua of the people that came before us. Also, if it weren't for the civil rights movement, nobody would have been allowed, no immigrants would have been allowed from Muslim majority countries to begin with. So even just our presence here is still owed to that same struggle for liberation and for justice in this land, subhanAllah. Which actually brings me to my biggest point. Allah, subhanallah. The context of America is white supremacy. And the way that white supremacy works, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined it for us in the Quran as the Pharaonic system. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the Pharaonic system, and it's so dead on what you see in white supremacy. White supremacy is the colonization that brought the immigrants here to begin with. It's the anti-blackness, it's the enslavement. It is the colonization of this land. All of that is rooted in white supremacy. And when you study the Pharaonic system in the Quran, it's so dead on similar to how white supremacy now functions. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Pharaonic system in Surah Al-Qasas, and it's actually a very short ayah. And it's fascinating to me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this whole system, all they deserve is one ayah, because it's very, yeah. It says, إِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ عَلَى فِي الْأَرْضِ وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. Pharaoh rose in the land, divided its people into groups. And here the word Shia, separate from like Shia or Sunnah or any of that, the word Shia in the Arabic language means a group with a distinct identity. So he divided people into groups and convinced them they were different. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues in the ayah, it says, يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِّنْهُمْ. He oppresses one of the groups. And ta'ifa just means a subgroup from a larger group. So even in the ayah itself, it's implying that they're actually not very different from each other. They're just all human beings, and he divided them into groups. He oppresses one of the groups. And the way that his oppression is actually very gendered. يُذَبِّحُ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيِي نِسَاءَهُم. He butchers their sons, and he keeps their women alive. إِنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ I should look up the ayah. I'm not going to finish the ayah in case I screw it up. But like, he is a horrible oppressor. But if you look at how America functions now, like even when I was studying, like how many Muslims are here? I mentioned 42% were born in America, 58% were born and were migrated to America. But even when you look at that groups, the Muslims are actually the most ethnically diverse religious group in the country. And these are the divisions in the larger society. When we talk about the different minority groups, they're supposed to compete with each other so we can decide who's the best minority. Who gets to be the model minority? And what you end up doing is you're still competing against other groups of oppressed people to become less oppressed. Pharaoh didn't have to oppress all of the groups. He just picked one and kept his boot down so hard on this one group of people to make sure that no one else revolted against him. And this is essentially how America works. And on occasion, America will kind of transition where they're like, oh, for a while, actually Hispanic people were considered white because we wanted to make blacks a bigger minority. And then after a while, they're like, oh, there's a lot of them. Hispanics are a new minority. And this is why even when you read a lot of the census, like it always asks your ethnicity and then separately asks if you're Hispanic or not. Just some of the history of how America continued to divide people into groups. Now Islam is telling us that who we are as human beings, our value is our dignity based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah created every human being dignified. Our value among each other is who has the most taqwa. So in the Quran, and we love to recite this ayat, like MLK, we had the MLK holiday like a week ago. We recite almost every MLK holiday. And you send a Muslim, this is the ayah they recite. Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. We created you from a male and a female. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bringing up the idea of gender. And we made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. The benefit of all of us knowing each other, when I always introduce in non-Muslim spaces where people are like, oh, what are the Muslims? I'm like, we're the most ethnically diverse religious group in the country. Our potlucks are amazing. Everything else is hard. Because you have people from all over the world. But what an opportunity for us to actually heal these divides, to heal the white supremacy, first in our own institutions, and then in the larger institutions. And Muslims can give this example to everyone around us of like, this is how we actually do it. SubhanAllah. My teacher, Sheikh Ayyub, Allah yarhamu, and I don't want to go on for too long, so I make sure that Brother Munir also gets an opportunity to share some of his thoughts. My teacher, Sheikh Ayyub, Allah yarhamu, he started 30 years ago in Cincinnati. He started an iftar, like, him and his wife didn't actually intentionally be like, let's start an iftar program. Like, they were going to the masjid, and as you do, they brought extra food for whoever was there that didn't have food. And they kept doing this, where every night during iftar, him and his wife would go to the masjid, they'd eat, and then he would lead tarawih. And then after a while, word started to spread that if you're hungry, go to the masjid. There are people there that can offer you food. And it kept growing and growing and growing, so his wife started to call the other families and saying, hey, I can't make food for this many people every night in Ramadan. So then they started sharing it. This was 30 years ago. We have since, more than 30 years ago, the community in Cincinnati has since fed hundreds of people per night in iftar in Ramadan. I have more than one friend that walked into a masjid one day at an iftar, looked at the diversity of everyone sitting in the iftar, looked around and said, wow, this is the dream that they were talking about. Took her shahada, became Muslim, joined the community. Poor thing later realized that racism still sadly exists in the masjid. Really, we have to work on that. We don't have to work on it, we have to end it. Like, it just really needs to stop existing. SubhanAllah. That's the happier part. Well, I don't know if that was the happier part. When we look at our Muslim community, we lose 1 in 3 American-born Muslims. So if you're born Muslim in America, the chances of you continuing to be Muslim into adulthood is 67%. For converts, 2 out of 3 of them end up losing Islam. It's actually half. And a lot of the times it's a lack of community support. The Quran is beautiful, the Prophet ﷺ is beautiful, the example is beautiful. But unless if we actually bring it to life, it's still going to continue to be theoretical. If you walk into the masjid and someone loves you because the most important thing to them is La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and the most important thing to you is La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and that's the only reason you love each other, and be like, Ya Allah, I want to go to Jannah with this person. And you make dua for each other. So fundamentally different than getting kicked out of a masjid. Full disclosure, I've gotten kicked out of more masajid than not. And if you're asking what I was doing, I promise I wasn't starting a fight. I was praying in a masjid. A masjid is a place to pray. And if I walk in and they're like, women can't pray here, there's no space for women, I'm like, yeah, but it's Luhr time and I'm not going to miss salah. You have to yell at me when I'm done because Allahu Akbar. It's a masjid. And alhamdulillah, like, I feel like alhamdulillah, because I studied, I learned the hadith to respond of, like, the Prophet ﷺ said, you cannot prevent the female servants of Allah from the houses of Allah. Like, I don't understand the ambiguity in that statement that people are like, oh, I don't get it. It's so incredibly clear. And then you say things, I'm like, how could you tell me I can't come to Jummah? And they're like, it's just fiqh. And I'm like, oh, really? The other command of the Prophet ﷺ is not fiqh. How is one command fiqh and the other one not? You are not allowed to tell me I can't be in the masjid. Also, the most consistent misconception about Muslims in America is actually not terrorism at all, it's the oppression of women. And every time I've showed up in a space and they're like, Islam oppresses women, I'm like, my dude, they sent me. If we are serious about our da'wah, we would stop disenfranchising the women, we would make sure that the women are included, not just included, but are actually the leaders in our community. If you look at the most well-known Muslims in America right now, the vast majority of them are women. They're the ones that are rocking and shaking, that are just like, we're just going to go live out our Islam unapologetically, and we're just going to do this. SubhanAllah. I want to make sure I give Brother Munir space for conversation, and to make sure that even as we are discussing this, hopefully there'll be plenty of time for discussion. I didn't come from a place of like, oh, I studied Islam, alhamdulillah, and I give the talks. It's very weird for me to be on this side. Alhamdulillah, like, my husband and I have worked in the community for years and years and years and years before I ever thought of going to study. Because in my mind, like, alhamdulillah, even the studying still fuels the service. It is still about how do we set up, who's moving the chairs, who's moving the tables. And again, when we look at the example of the Prophet ﷺ, and I'm going to end on this, Because when we think about building community, it's about valuing every single member in our community. It's not about kicking people out. It's not about deciding like, sorry, I know I said I was going to end on it. I'm not going to end on it. I'm going to share two more things. The Prophet ﷺ said, what if one of you had a stream of water in front of their house and bathed in it 5 times a day? And they're like, you'd be the squeakiest, cleanest person ever. And he said, that's what salah is. And the masjid is the place where you do salah. So if we're actually using salah correctly, it's the shaitan that's telling you, it's like, oh, you're too dirty, you might as well not shower. Be like, no, no, if you're dirty, you shower. Like, if you have it, you come, you pray. Who's this person that decided it was their job to gatekeep and decide if you're Muslim enough to come in, if you're clean enough to come in? We all have our issues. This is the place where we all come and we all pray together and we all heal each other. SubhanAllah, there was a man that used to go to the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ and he would show up drunk. This was after alcohol was prohibited. He would show up drunk to the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. I can't imagine that if a drunk person showed up to any of our masajid that they would make it out safely. This person showed up to the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ drunk. And he showed up regularly. And one of the other Sahaba, one of the times, he's like, look at this man, so beholden to the alcohol. And the Prophet ﷺ looked at him and said, why are you supporting the shaitan against your brother? He's here because he loves Allah and his Prophet. When we have our struggles, our masjid is our place to heal. If he's ever going to get over his alcoholism, it should be in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in the masjid. That's how we actually solve our issues. This is what I did want to end with. There was a woman that used to clean the masjid at night. And she passed away at night, and they buried her, and the Prophet ﷺ started looking for her. He's like, where is she? They said, oh, Ya Rasulullah, we buried her. She passed away and we buried her. And he got so angry. He said, why didn't you tell me? And it was because someone else had decided that she was not important enough to tell the Prophet ﷺ. And he went and he prayed. He redid her janazah. Because she is valuable. And if none of us see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees. Allah knows. Nobody's word goes to nothing. And if you want to get something out of the masjid, show up. Come to the masjid. Let's change our statistics. If we had a failure rate this high in terms of the number of people leaving Islam, oh my God, we would have gotten fired from any job. I'm a college chaplain, and usually people either becoming Muslim or leaving Islam usually happens in the college years, and anytime I show up to a community, I'm like, oh, you don't have a college chaplain. Only the future of like your kids' Islam depends on it, but sure, you don't have a chaplain. SubhanAllah. MashaAllah. Assalamualaikum. May Allah continue to put barakah in our masajid. May Allah make them all places of light. May Allah fill our masajid with love. The love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may they all be lighthouses for everyone around us. So that hopefully we all make it to Jannah together, and then we all meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he's proud of us. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, and prayers and blessings be on his beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And now Brother Munir will say lots of smart things, inshallah.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. That was beautiful. So, Doctor, how do I follow up on that? So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahim. So, the name of my talk is Creating the Welcoming, Inclusive, Dynamic Masjid. And my name is Munir Safi. And I have had the privilege of managing the MCC Masjid for the past 6 years. And I'm just honored to see the growth of this organization. The MCC is still very much an experiment, and it's by no means the welcoming, inclusive, dynamic masjid that we all aspire for it to be. But I think for any organization, any masjid, it's a journey of inches. And each day we try to be a little more incrementally closer to the goal. First of all, I just want to say I'm very privileged to be on the stage with Dr. Amina. You know, at MCC, I'm often the man behind the scenes. You know, like Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I want to just run smooth forums and talks for great speakers like Dr. Amina, just to operate. So, but the reason I'm up here, there's threefold reason up there. First, I want to be her co-pilot. I'm just very honored to be up here because she is relatively new to the Bay Area. And I think this is her second talk at MCC, and hopefully one of many, many, many more talks to come here, inshallah. Second, I believe in this topic. Masjids matter, and we know from the original prophetic masjid, which was forging this early Islamic identity. It was this place at the intersection of intellectual and spiritual crossroads. 1,400 years ago later, the masjids in America today, masjids still remain the oasis. It keeps the community together. It has to be strong. It has to be flourishing. I feel one reason Islam will survive after that critical third generation, when other ethnic and religious communities who've come to America have either shed or relinquished their cultural and religious legacy, will be this awesome milieu that we're living in. So it's going to be the masjid that kind of help us out. Thirdly, kind of personally here, there's just a scarcity of information out there about operating a masjid successfully in the West. It's sometimes really difficult to come by. My previous life, I was a reporter, and when I pivoted careers into nonprofit management 6 years ago, I come from the Midwest, and I'm the first masjid operations manager I ever met myself. So I just didn't know where to turn when I got into this. So I went on to Amazon and I searched for masjid management books. I didn't find anything, but what I did find was church management books written in the 1980s, 1990s, and ironically, when I read those books, some of the churches were closer to the prophetic model in Medina than some of the masjids I visited throughout my life, and even here in the Bay Area. But I'll get into that, inshallah. So first, I just want to make a quick acknowledgement. Last year, I had the privilege of attending Dr. Ahsan Bagbi's talk about creating a welcome, inclusive, dynamic masjid. This is one of those guys that if we had a Dr. Ahsan Bagbi in every of the nearly 2,800 mosques in America, we have no issues as a community. So this evening, I'd like to kind of synthesize what I learned and hopefully amplify his amazing talk, which was very sparsely attended, but just deserves to have a lot more coverage in the community. So let me tell you about Dr. Bagbi. He's researched masjids for 30 years, and he's put on 3 national U.S. mosque surveys in 2000, 2010, and then recently in 2020. For the most recent survey, we've just been learning about this tremendous growth of the number of mosques, but with that we're seeing this quality over this need for quality over quantity, and the sense of disillusionment that we're seeing with second-generation American Muslims. They are seeing the mosque as calcifying, because what we call in nonprofit management the founder syndrome. It's when the uncles and the aunties who, as immigrants in the U.S., may Allah bless them, they established the masjid and Islamic center, but it's kind of become their baby. And they don't really allow that critical injection of new leadership and ideas, and as a result, those Muslim spaces are not relevant. Or, in churches, they call them unchurched. And now in mosques, we talk about youth and young professionals that are unmosqued. And we've heard this term anecdotally over years, but now we have research to back up what's happening here. Because, we see the Eids here. They're amazing, but where are these people for the other 363 days of the year? So a quick tangent, alhamdulillah, right now we build masjids, and soon we're thinking about a second masjid and a third masjid because the space runs out and Jummah is crowded, alhamdulillah. But in interfaith circles, when I've talked with our colleagues of different faiths, right now we're kind of the envy of the Christian pastors and the Jewish synagogue leaders when they hear about all the youth and the numbers that we have in the mosque. But what they're saying on a national level is just wait. Because we've been where you have in this growth stage back in the 70s, 80s as churches. But now they're dwindling. And so if we don't get our act together, we'll be closing masjids in the coming decades, like we're seeing with our religious peers happening currently. So we're really at a critical time, and there's still time to turn the ship, so to speak, and have relevant masjids. It's not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity for the survival, I feel, of a strong, proud Muslim identity in America. So masjids, why do masjids matter? So if you're watching online right now, or if you're here, you're already part of the solution because you're a change maker. We know mosques matter. For one, the masjids connect Muslims to Allah and to one another as a community, and masjids are the main institution that we're going to be using to pass on the Islamic legacy to generations to come. But what are the challenges? So according to research coming from national surveys, here are the challenges that mosques are facing today. Many young adults, women, and converts are dissatisfied with the mosque. Masjid leaders are complaining that there's a lack of volunteers and then a lack of commitment from attendees at the masjid. And then masjid attendees are complaining about a lack of unity, a lack of sense of belonging when they come to the masjid, and then a disconnect from the leadership. So let's go back to the prophetic model. We have a clear model of what a masjid should look like. The masjid, when the Prophet ﷺ, when he migrated to Medina, that structure, the edifice, it was the center of Muslim life in Medina. It was just not the place for 5 daily prayers. It was a place for the sinner, like we heard, and the saint to go to. So if you were hungry, if you need money, if you need food, if you've fallen off the bandwagon and drank alcohol, if you argued with your spouse and you need refuge, Muslims knew at that time where to go, and the masjid was that place to go for help, for solace. So where are we now? Let's just think about the masjid that was there. When we think about all the words that came up, this is the kind of words that I thought about. Clean, trustworthy masjid. This is the prophetic masjid. There was good leadership. It was welcoming. Brotherhood. It was purpose-driven. Sisterhood, community, no judgment, loving, peace, helpful, embracing, mission-oriented, social, professional. Those are the words that we use to describe that mosque, or what I think of. So today I just want to focus on 3 words: welcoming, inclusive, dynamic. Those are the 3 words that I think that can really help us. So first let's look at creating a welcoming masjid. So this, according to the national surveys, this is going to be the main draw for young people and young professionals. This is page 1 stuff for masjids. If your masjid doesn't get down being a welcoming masjid, the writing is on the wall as far as I'm concerned for the relevance of that masjid in the coming years and the coming decades. So again, looking at the prophetic model, the Prophet ﷺ said, "You will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. Shall I show you something that if you do, you will love one another?" And that's spread salam amongst yourselves. So this is true brotherhood, true sisterhood. This is the cornerstone of every masjid, brotherhood and sisterhood. And one of the things I love about the Muhammad ﷺ's first statement when he entered Medina after suffering years of abuse, his first words to the people of Medina: spread salam, feed the hungry, maintain ties with your family, pray at night when others are sleeping. And when you look at that statement, it's just spectacular, because the first 3 things are all about your relationship with other people. It's about connecting with humanity even before your personal connection with God. It's your personal connection with other human beings. So let's look at the research. When focus groups were happening with ISPU, which is a national organization here that's studying, they put out this great research called Remaking Muslim Spaces. And the focus group participants agreed that the most attractive aspect of a masjid for them is that sense that they're welcomed. So this is one quote: "When I walk in, I get smiles and salams." This came from a young South Asian sister who fell in love with an inner city African American masjid because the person who greeted her at the door when she came in was warm and welcoming. And you know who that person was? It was a security guard. That tells us how picky we have to be about the people who represent the masjid, from the board president to the teen parking volunteer at Jummah. Each of these people might be the only Quran a person ever reads who steps forward in our masjid. Another quote: "This mosque gives me encouragement, beneficial guidance, and not just criticism." This came from a young adult convert who was corrected in a brotherly fashion. He was praying correctly, and he was corrected in a brotherly fashion. That shows a welcoming masjid. So there are 3 items every masjid can do, in my opinion, and Dr. Bagby's opinion, to be more welcoming. So the first is to form a welcoming committee. The second, create a welcoming message. And the third is create a welcoming culture. So let's look at each of these briefly, inshallah. So the welcome squad, they're called the Taslim squad as well. These are greeters that can represent every segment of the community in gender, in ages, and they stand at the door and give salam and assistance to anybody who comes for Jummah or comes for major events. This could be the leader of the masjid, and the leader of the masjid really should be involved, because we know the fish rots from the head. It starts at the top there, and the message has to start at the top. The greeters, So in the ISPU study, when leaders of the masjid started greeting people as they entered for Jummah, the next year the masjid scored significantly higher in attendees feeling included, listened to, and valued. The welcome committee can set up a table in the foyer or outside both of the entrances, and they just strike up conversation after Jummah or before or after events and just get to know people. They can give out onboarding guides, they can give out welcome guides. So new attendees will know that they're valued when they come inside there. And then, there's so much that happens at the masjid. It's hard to get onboarded sometimes. There's different services, classes, newsletters, WhatsApp groups. The masjids usually have a lot to offer. So the welcome committee can be that bridge there. They can also ask attendees, tell me about your interest, what's your expertise, and have them fill out contact forms and encourage involvement in events and committees. I had visited this one amazing church here in Castro Valley. Subhanallah, mashallah. The welcome team there on every Sunday is so strong that it's a competition amongst the Sunday greeters to get the welcome card to the first-time visitor in their hand. They will pretty much tackle you when they see a new face in the congregation just to get the contact card in your hand. And then a few days later, they call you or they email you saying, how was your visit? What can we do? What can the church do to help you? Subhanallah. The committee should also give special attention to those who might feel out of place. So who could this be? The ethnic groups that don't represent the dominant ethnic groups in the masjid, and the new converts. Those are usually the groups. So let's talk about creating a welcome message. So we could ask the khatib to talk about being welcoming, on being good brothers and good sisters to each other. The masjids in the ISPU study that we talked about, they scored much higher on being welcoming after the khutbahs that they had, stressing brotherhood and sisterhood. You could also place big signs at the entrance saying, this is a masjid that's welcoming. You can adopt a tagline and put that on every sign, every welcome, every newsletter, every website. At MCC, we've been using this tagline for years, finding faith in community. So those are thoughts there. Okay, so what can we do to develop a welcoming culture? So the practice of giving salam and a handshake, well, before COVID, handshake. So you could end the Jummah by encouraging the congregation to say salam to another. So so you might say, okay, so the person to your right, say salam to, or challenge the congregation. Before you leave, after your sunnah, try to say salam to one person, give a smile and say salam to one person that you don't know in the congregation. Another big thing about developing a welcome culture is to stop the haram police. These are people, maybe sometimes well-intentioned, that try to correct others or just criticize others. And the congregation should know that there's one person they can go to who has the interpersonal capacity to correct things in a proper way. This kind of emotionally intelligent brother and sister can kind of be that person in the community that will do that. We all know this famous story of the Bedouin, and excuse me for saying this, that urinated in the masjid. And the Sahaba, they were ready to pounce on this person. But the Prophet ﷺ stopped them, and he explained in this very gingerly way the etiquette of the masjid. And that shows the love, the welcome, and culture that he tried to make. All right, so the next word we're going to talk about is creating an inclusive masjid. So let's look again at the prophetic model. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, you see the believers in their mutual compassion, love, and empathy for one another like one body. So from that, let's look at some of the research. So from National Mosque research, we learned that people feel included when they feel that their voices and their interests are being considered. So if the leadership listens to people, it improves the sense of belonging. And then people that feel included, when they see faces like themselves in attendance and in leadership positions. So the young adult, he'll say, when I don't see faces like me, I don't think I belong. So having young people on the board, ethnically diverse people on the board. And then, of course, it goes back on the bottom line of the masjid. When people feel that they're welcome and included, the greater likelihood that they'll donate and they'll volunteer to the masjid. So a big one here is being inclusive to women. So the women's spaces, very important, and we heard about this from Dr. Amina. Women's spaces should be clean, they should be comfortable, they should be attractive, and women should be serving on the masjid boards and the committees. And they should have the choice to pray either in the main musalla or in a separate area. And the messaging should be consistent. In khutbahs, in events, and occasions, women are cherished and welcomed at this masjid. So, we get some pushback on this. Oh, was the masjid, the Prophet ﷺ's masjid like this? So, ISNA, mashallah, in their infinite wisdom, they've worked with the Fiqh Council of North America and many other Islamic scholars. And the statement they put out, we call upon all masjids to ensure that women have access to the main musalla to perform salah, listen to the Jummah khutbah, and attend or participate in lectures or discussions. So there's scholarly backing to this. The next critical cohort is being inclusive of young adults. So finding a young adult champion to kind of lead the effort is so critical for the young adults. So you organize listening sessions with young adults to hear their interests and their concerns, and then you can facilitate young adults to form their own group and then support them in doing that. Young adults should be also, young professionals should be present in leadership positions and the minbar. So just being sensitive to young families and always provide babysitting for events. So another thing we can talk about is the diversity on the masjid board. Masjid leadership should reflect the diversity of the masjid, and the faces, especially at the Jummah khutbah, should also reflect that diversity. Just clear messaging that diversity is Islamic and it's valued in this masjid, and making attendees know that the faces and the names of the leaders of the masjid and highlighting the diversity of that board is just critical. So another thing that they talked about masjids that are inclusive is the availability of leadership. So the leaders, the imams, they should be part of the taslim squad, part of the welcome squad, to create those opportunities to listen to the attendees, to have that pipeline. So communication, let's talk about that one being inclusive. So posting the minutes of the board meetings, posting the budget. What are the elections? What's the masjid budget going on? These aspects are all part of the due diligence that we can do as masjids to be just really transparent. And we can have e-newsletters, we can be active on our website, we can have Facebook, we can generate annual reports, we can hold town hall meetings. So much to do to have good, strong communication with our congregation. So let's talk about some means of building brotherhood. So there are events you can put on. So there could be a day where everyone wears a name tag and everyone greets one another with that name tag, and that encourages one another to get to know one another. There's cultural nights where one particular group in the congregation or culture, their culture is highlighted. Family groups. So this is when 4 or 5 families or individuals are kind of joined together as a unit, and they meet once a month to socialize and kind of get to know each other. The disabled. This is something that's so important. The masjid should be wheelchair accessible. The restrooms and wudu areas should be accessible, and braille Quran should be accessible and available in the prayer hall. And then you can form a support group for the disabled and the mentally challenged. What I will mention is there's a great group in Chicago called Mosque, and you can reach out to them. You can learn how to be more accommodating to the disabled in the community. So creating the dynamic, relevant masjid. Let's talk about that now. So we talked about being inclusive, and now we'll talk about being welcoming, being inclusive, now being dynamic. So the prophetic model. O you who believe, shall I lead you to a bargain that will save you from the grievous punishment? Believe in Allah and His Messenger, and strive in the cause of Allah with your wealth and your lives. So the mission of our prophetic masjid was really this: increasing and nurturing faith, knowledge in the community. So let's look about some of the research that's out there. So young adults want a masjid that's relevant. So the dynamic masjid presents relevant programming and offers numerous opportunities to become involved. So as a result, the masjid feels alive, it feels vital, engaged, exciting for them. So people who want to volunteer are more likely to volunteer when they feel a sense of belonging. This is one quote that came from the ISB study. They gave me extremely relevant khutbahs. So every time it seems that it's not some really abstract concept, it's something that can be implemented. Another quote, I appreciate the masjid so much because it engaged in the issues that I feel are important. Another quote, there are so many ways to be involved. So this is really what it comes down to whenever you want to be a masjid that's relevant and dynamic and welcoming. You come down to these kind of quotes that you get back. So, developing and promoting a mission. So, when you have a clear understanding of the masjid's mission and when it's tied to the vision of Islam and the prophetic mosque, and you're really focusing on the individual, that's when you're making change. There's ways you can do this. You can conduct a strategic planning process to identify the masjid's missions and goals. So another way is to be relevant. So mosques must be inviting, inspiring, knowledgeable. The speakers and khatibs who speak, they must speak eloquently, have the milieu of living in America in 2022 in mind, have powerful topics that are interest to the community, whether they're spiritual or they're worldly. And then the leaders of the masjid need to regularly evaluate the khatibs, regularly evaluate the khutbahs to make sure that they stay relevant and there's always a fresh message that doesn't go dormant from the minbar. Another thing that we can talk about for dynamic masjids is appointing a volunteer coordinator. So recruiting volunteers really requires personal contact. When someone asks a person to volunteer, it really it has much more impact than it's just an email that's going out. And when friends ask friends to volunteer, that's the most effective way of getting volunteers. So a volunteer coordinator takes information maybe collected from the welcome committee, and then they contact the people and they offer them ways to become involved and volunteer. So then another thing for an inclusive masjid is forming small groups. So a large masjid like MCC, for example, a medium to large masjid, it's hard to get a sense of belonging because there's so many people here. So forming smaller groups, smaller clusters is another way of getting people involved and getting that sense of belonging. Identity interest from conversations and information forms, and then facilitating formation of small groups. So forming small study groups of various segments of the congregation, you could be making cohorts of young mothers, young adults, people that are interested in environmentalism, some that are interested in sports. There's so many different ways that you can go with that. So let's talk about some of the essential and necessary programs for every masjid. So community service is key, convert care, supporting both the social and the educational aspects of the new Muslim, making the mosque more environmentally friendly, creating a green masjid. Dawah is so critical, reaching out to your community and educating them. This could be having open houses, interfaith program, or intrafaith programs where you invite peers from the Shia masjid, the local Shia masjid, and having an intrafaith program. So that's all I really have. I'm not as polished, mashallah, as Dr. Amina. I just really want to extol some of the stuff that I've learned from church management books, for what I've learned from Dr. Ehsan Bagbi, who I consider a mentor for me as I'm trying to navigate this. And I just kind of put it all into a blender and just try to put out there. So I'm sorry if it wasn't as polished, mashallah, as Dr. Amina. But I really just hope that may Allah just bless the efforts of every person who's involved in the masjid. I just find so much grounding in the masjid. I grew up in the Midwest, and you know, when I was growing up in Omaha, where I grew up, you know, we didn't have many events at our masjid, but once a year we would have a fundraising event, and we would have an out of town speaker coming to our little masjid in Omaha. They were from Chicago, and all the youth that were kind of involved in the masjid, we were all so excited leading into the fundraising event. And this is a fundraising event. It wasn't just a regular program for the masjid. And we were like, oh my God, there's going to be an out-of-time speaker. There's going to be food there. It's going to be so great. And that's all we got. And then weeks after that event, we would just be talking about, oh my God, wasn't it great that we had this kind of event? So when you had this kind of dearth of Islamic programming over there, when you see the masjids, mashallah, here in the Bay Area, and across California, we have this critical mass of Muslims here. So the youth of the community are just so lucky, and just don't give it up for granted. Fight for your masjid, be involved in your masjid. That's really what it comes down to. So I will say that Dr. Ehsan Bagbi, who I consider a mentor, if you ever want to get a hold of him and do a presentation of your masjid, he can do a 2-hour, 3-hour masjid presentation to your board, and this is his contact information. Everything I've said, really, it comes from him, because I've been just kind of getting all his talks, his lectures, because for so often in the past 6 years I've been looking at church management books, and now I see this crop of research coming from ISPU, from ISNA, and from Dr. Bagby. And it's just, for masjids, it's so critical that we start getting into the research, getting in there, because anecdotally, we can't just go off the hip anymore in running the masjids. It's got to be research-based and seeing what the best practices are. So, Jazakallah khair. Do you have any questions? Okay. All right, do you want to give the mic around? All right. So if you have any questions, inshallah, Sister Number is there. And then if you have questions for the live stream viewers, if you want to put it in the chat, we have somebody monitoring the questions as well. And they can answer that, inshallah. Because of Omicron, it's just hard for us to be putting on these events. So we're doing the best we can with the virtual. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand, inshallah, and Sister Number can come to you. Do you have anything else you want to say based on some of the stuff that I mentioned?
Star, alhamdulillah, I have the honor of knowing him and his wife. MashaAllah, they're both community servants that have been doing it for years. May Allah reward them for all of their effort. Masjid Bilal, he was one of the founders of Masjid Bilal. I can't remember which city in Kentucky. Is it Louisville? Louisville, well, there's two big ones. It's Louisville or Lexington. So saying it's one of the L cities is not helpful at all. But Muhammad Ali alayhi rahmatullah, he was in Louisville, and I remember going to his janazah, subhanallah, and you think, like, subhanallah, I don't want to, if I talk about Muhammad Ali's janazah, I might start crying, but I just, like, subhanallah, like, he was this person that was a picture of, like, physical health, and he passed away, and he's just our Muslim brother that needs our dua now. Subhanallah. But yeah, back to Masjid Bilal. Masjid Bilal is awesome. Do you have a question?
So there's one from the YouTube chat online. Najib Azhar says, how can a community survey serve to help offer relevant programs?
What are the programs you want to come to? Like some of the ones you mentioned, like I remember, subhanAllah, we used to do a monthly like community event of, and we would try to bring in like all the different, because we were a very ethnically diverse masjid. Let's celebrate the ethnicities in the masjid. Like, how cool is it to have, like, we had a soul food night, and our black brothers and sisters came and shared about the history of Islam in America. We had a Bosnian night, and we had Bosnian food, and then we had our Bosnian brothers and sisters singing in Bosnia. Like every Muslim majority culture in the world has poetry praising the Prophet ﷺ. So they came and they performed. Like, that sounds like so much fun. When we were on campus, we did Ramadan around the world. Every night, we had food from a different culture. We're just celebrating the ummah. But what that does for people, like, I remember when we would order Malaysian food, all of the Malaysian students were super excited. They felt so welcomed, so included. When we were on campus, we had 3 different black cultures. We had a Senegalese night, a Somali night, and a soul food night. The Black Student Union on campus, all of the black students, Muslim and non-Muslim, fasted all 3 days in Cream and prayed Maghrib with us. Because it was one of the few places on campus where black culture was just being celebrated. Without talking about, like, having to talk about the trauma that is the black experience in America. When we, like, subhanAllah, Dr. Rania recently published this article how the suicide rate among American Muslims is actually twice the average. We have a very real crisis in our community, and like spiritual communities, the masajid, give you the resilience. Because if you are struggling, this is literally someone that loves you. When we think of like salah is mandatory, salah is fard. There are commands in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, hold on to the rope of Allah together. Us loving each other is a command from the Prophet ﷺ and command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. It's fard. It's fun for us to like open our houses to people. If you look at all the people that you've ever invited in your house, and if they all look the same, expand your circle. Because what you're saying is, I only value this circle. I don't actually value La ilaha illallah and anyone that says La ilaha illallah, I only value this circle. Expand, go meet people. How hard is it to, like, also you get to eat fabulous food. Food is a theme in my life.
Inshallah. So I think the question about the community survey is so relevant because so often we're putting on events and we're not necessarily thinking about, okay, well, is this what the community wants? But I think it comes down to also when we think about what the community wants, what about the ones that aren't coming to the masjid anymore? We're talking about the unmosqued, the youth that stop attending the masjid. We're talking about the ones that have kind of perished because of some addiction that they have. When we talk about can a masjid be progressive and strong enough to host a AA meeting? When we have non-Muslims come to the masjid and we're saying, hey, our community is strong enough to talk about this openly and not victimize ourselves anymore, those are the kind of discussions that we can start doing at the masjids so the disabled, they're not coming to the masjid because they feel ostracized sometimes. What are we doing to bring them in there? So the community say will be great, but usually you're kind of preaching to the choir. You're kind of talking to those ones that are already involved and they want to see more spiritual talks or something that's really relevant to their lives. But what about the kids that are dealing with pornography addiction or dealing with marijuana, and they don't realize that this is not the marijuana that of my mom's generation. This is much stronger stuff. Where are they getting this information from if it's not the masjid that's constantly guiding them? So it's got to be not just the survey where you just put out, you just kind of sit back on your laurels and think, oh, we put it out there. It's got to be much more with your finger on the pulse of the community to know that there's people out there that are not going to come into the masjid. How can we get them inside here to do it? And maybe that comes down to being a third space. Maybe you need to bring this out of the masjid just to get them back into the masjid.
Yeah, absolutely. We had an event called Losing My Religion, and nobody got the song reference because they were all college kids, which I'm still sad about. It's an 80s song, it's fabulous. REM, and he's talking about how the spotlight is making him lose his religion. I told the students, and I'm like, ask whatever you want anonymously, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. But just, like, it's a catchy title. I was pushing the envelope on purpose of, like, hey, come in. The assumption of, like, oh, if we never talk about this, it never exists. Like, honestly, if you're not having a talk with your teenagers about Islamic sexual ethics, I promise they're learning it somewhere. And it's probably not going to be Islamic. Like, if you actually want to go talk about it. The Prophet ﷺ didn't shy away from it. He had very open conversations with the Sahaba. And they all learned. How are we supposed to learn? Like, the assumption of, like, oh, like, not the void is actually not just a void. The void is negative. You have to put in positive programming so that people actually learn their tradition in a way that's fun and joyous and funny. Instead of, like, boring. I don't know. Yeah.
Another thing is the khutbah. SubhanAllah, when I've gone to masjid that the khutbah is in Farsi or Arabic, I was at this one masjid and they were all from South Asian community. The khutbah was in Arabic. Everybody's eyes was kind of glazing over there. You have this 15, 20-minute golden opportunity. I honestly believe if the khutbah is not relevant and doesn't catch the people, like the khatib should be arrested or something. Like it should be very serious because you get only 15, 20 minutes with them, and you got it there. So so don't invite the khatib back. You've got to be very picky because what comes from the minbar, you're talking with them. I always tell the staff here as well, and I constantly have to remind them, it's a privilege to be here at the masjid. It is such an honor to be able to answer that phone and deal with somebody who opens up about their problems, about their kid who they feel has jinn issues going on, but really you know in your mind there's some schizophrenia or something going on there, and trying to do it. Because so often our community, they're looking for this microwave answer. I'm going to bring my kid to the masjid and just do a little kuf on him, and everything's going to be okay. And it's a much more long process, and you've got to sit down with them and say, how are you? How's your relationship with God? How's your kid's relationship with God? When was the last time you came to the masjid? When was the last time you prayed? You have these difficult conversations, and that's what it comes down to. It's very difficult work here, but at the same time, you realize that you are so fortunate to be here because Allah could put somebody that can do this job better. And that's why all the staff here, they all know that they are might be the only Quran anybody ever reads. And so if that's the case, we've got to carry ourselves in the most becoming way that there could be. So the khutbah has got to be there, the staff has to be there, the program has to be there, and also having a pulse on the community has to be there. Jazakallah khair.
Question from the audience. Yes.
I just have a couple of comments. I think this will be a good topic for one of the khutbahs. maybe 2-3 times, so that people understand what's needed and what's missing in the community. And maybe they can, also get involved. The other thing is, I never see the leadership greeters around here. I mean, I know most of them, but I never really see them greeting people or spending time with them. So that, are the leadership listening to this?
So what I was talking about is MCC is working to become a masjid that's more inclusive, and these are some of the ideas that we're working on. But the leadership, mashallah, they work a lot behind the scenes, and I think that might be to their detriment that they don't put themselves out enough. So, I mean, there's a need for that, and that I think that we haven't yet started a welcoming committee here where we're actually doing intake as people come in here, and that's probably been a bit something that we just talked about, but there's so many balls up in the air sometimes that we kind of lose focus on some of the critical projects that we try to put on the back burner. But that's a great point that the leadership has to be involved.
At work I was involved in diversity, part of the diversity council. And that's one of the things I did, greeting people, talking to them all the time, and people will be coming to me. It's very important.
I agree, mashallah, and Prophet ﷺ actually taught us this, tabassumuki fi wajhi akhika sadaqa, that you smiling in your brother or your sister's face is charity.
And if you close to the community, greeting them, having discussions with them, you'll get a lot of ideas and volunteers. So that's really very important.
Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ was definitely a man of his people. I was just the other day reading this hadith about how it's a day of Eid, and in Medina they were all kind of marching, and it was a happy day. Everybody had their great clothes on. Prophet ﷺ, mashallah, he was with everybody, but he was a man of great emotional intelligence. We talk so much about IQ, but modern studies are that the better emotional intelligence that you have, it's better than IQ, mashallah. So he sees this little boy kind of standing on the side of the road. And he goes over to them and he says, "Why aren't you joining the festival?" And he says, "Well, my father was martyred in Uhud, and all the little kids have their fathers that they're with on this joyous day, and I don't have anybody, so I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to be going to them." Muhammad sallallahu mashallah, a man of the people, always kind of kept his pulse on what's going on in society, and he says, "I'll be your father from now on." And the orphan became the envy of all the other boys because Muhammad ﷺ became his father, so to speak. He just was always a man of the people. We know the famous story of the little boy who he had this nightingale, this kulkul, and the bird died. And Muhammad ﷺ, he came to him and he said in such a beautiful Arabic way, "Oh, father of Omer," the bird's name was Omer, tell me what you used to do with the bird. And this boy just started opening up about the bird and what he liked to do with this, and this was cathartic for him. And he just let the boy talk about his bird. And so this is a man who constantly was with the people and around them, and he was a leader at the same time. He was pretty much the mayor of Medina, you might call him, but he still made time for the people. And we have so much to learn about his leadership skills.
I said him, but also noticed who was missing, who was looking sad, what was happening, and didn't feel like it was beneath him to go hang out with a child for an hour as he's telling him about his bird. SubhanAllah, again, us loving each other and taking the time to sit with someone, the difference between loving someone for the sake of Allah and not having that relationship. I'm happy because you're happy. I'm genuinely happy. And when you're sad, I genuinely feel pain. That's what loving someone for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. And people can tell the difference between being loved and not loved. We all can. SubhanAllah. Prophet awesome.
I feel like if I'm walking in San Francisco and I see him on the side, walking the road, I will recognize him right away. Just the youth, he was in my office the other day and he was talking about, we were just talking about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's like, if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was here today, what kind of car would he drive? And, I'm engaged in conversation with him, and I was thinking about it later on. I'm like, he wouldn't need to drive a car at all. Everybody would want to give him a ride. But he'd probably drive something very, a Corolla or a Prius or something.
I was going to say Honda Civic, but sure.
Honda Civic, there you go.
I mean, we know the names of his animals. Like,
Yeah.
every animal he rode had a name that was, like, honored. SubhanAllah.
Yeah.
Name your cars.
And the man had so much love. I mean, one of my favorite stories of him, and I tell my daughters this all the time, is, and they love hearing the story over and over again at night when we were going to bed at nighttime. There was, Muhammad was in a gathering, and there was kind of this man that came to the gathering, and he kind of had tattered clothes on, kind of a farmer, and the man brought a gift from Muhammad, and it was like a bead of grapes. And he gives it to the Prophet, and Muhammad, like I said, very emotionally intelligent, and he sees that this man is very impressed with the Prophet, so he wants to impress him with his gift. So he gives him the grapes, and then Muhammad, he starts eating the grapes and just telling him, "MashaAllah, so tasty, so delicious, so sweet," and just starts eating them one by one with all his Sahaba sitting around. Muhammad had a habit. Every time he would get a gift, he would share it with everybody around him, but this time he didn't share it. He ate all the grapes by himself. And the farmer was ecstatic. Oh my God, Muhammad loved my gift so much that he didn't share it with anybody else. Subhanallah. So he leaves happy. And then one of the Sahaba very respectfully asked the Prophet, every time you get a gift, you always share it with the people around you. Why didn't you share the grapes? Muhammad said, the grapes were sour. The farmer didn't know it, but he gave him sour grapes. And I was afraid that if I gave one of the grapes to you, you know how you make a face when you eat something sour, like a sour face? I was afraid you would do that and you'd hurt his feelings. So that's why he ate them, smiling and telling the farmer how much he loved him. So many stories that this man,
I just wanted, when we talk about the youth, I actually worked for Amina, the Muslim youth of North America. It's much bigger in the Midwest because you're the one Muslim family, or the one of two Muslim families. Like, mashallah, alhamdulillah, there are a lot more Muslims here, but they recently had a camp that was only an hour away from here, mashallah. The camp is completely organized by the youth. They have advisors, there's an adult setup. We help them book the spaces and things like this, but it's fundamentally run by the youth. When you're like, what are the fun programs that the youth want? I don't know, ask them. They put it on, they organize it, and they have such a sense of pride. After every single salah, one of the cabins gives a khatira. It's like 5 minutes, but they're like teaching everyone else something they learned about the Prophet ﷺ, and you hear them cheering for each other. Cheering each other on in their Muslimness of like, you gave the best 5-minute khatira ever until the next salah. And then they say the next person, like, you gave the best khatira ever. It's so exciting. And they're in the woods for a week. It's so transformative. Youth is such a critical age, subhanAllah. When we tell youth they're the future, they're not. They're the present. If they're not in the masjid, we've already lost. Like, genuinely, we've already lost. The average age of the people in the Battle of Badr was 25 years old. When you look at some of the major Sahaba that carried Islam on their shoulders, they converted when they were teenagers. How many of us passed by a 14-year-old, decided their opinions were not important enough? May Allah protect us from that. One of them can be Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu anhu. Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu anhu was 10. Many of us look at a 10-year-old and be like, what do you think? Prophet ﷺ did that. This is literally our prophetic example, to look at the 10-year-old and ask the 10-year-old, what do you think? And even his response, like, I think it's so fascinating, like how well the Prophet ﷺ treated him. He told him about Islam. He's like, but this is a big deal, so you can't tell anyone. He said, okay, I have to ask my father. First he said, let me think about it. Like, I don't know what 10-year-old you've spoken to that's like, let me think on this, it's important. And then he's like, let me go ask my father. And then he went and came back. And then he's like, you came back, you didn't ask your father. And he said, well, I decided since Allah created me that I don't need to ask my father to worship Allah, so I think I'm going to be Muslim. And then I'll tell my father. Like, it's such a phenomenal conversation. And he's 10 years old. SubhanAllah. And when you talk to the youth, like when I was at the Mina camp, I promise you some of the most challenging conversations I ever had were the Mina camps. Because this is the first time, like in your physical, emotional, and psychological development, that you're transitioning into adulthood. An 8-year-old or a 5-year-old might not be able to ask you, where's Allah, how do we know Allah exists? A 14-year-old is transitioning into an adult and saying, no, I need to know. How do I know Allah exists? What does Allah want from me? What is the purpose of life? So we're having deep, intense aqidah conversations that I would never have in the masjid. Like sometimes we have them in the masjid, but they're so much more real and intense at these camps, and you're watching a group of teenagers have their very first spiritual experience together. It's so transformative. They're friends for life. They discovered Allah together under the stars. Subhanallah. And what, it took a week in the woods? But we have to create these spaces. They created it for themselves. This idea that they don't know what they're doing is just not true. Subhanallah.
The youth these days, subhanallah. You know, when I was growing up, my parents were concerned, I hope he doesn't become Christian or Jew and leave Islam. Now, the worry is to just leave Islam altogether, to just do it. In this confusion that we have with postmodernism. There's a Hafiz in the Bay Area here. He had a talk 3 hours with one of the scholars here in the Bay Area. I don't think there's a God anymore. This is a Hafiz Quran. The scholar is telling him, subhanallah, you have memorized this book. And he's using verses that the young man has memorized to prove that there is a God. The world that we're living right now. I just got a call recently. A youth, he doesn't say salam or anything. Brother Munir, is it okay if I listen to Quran in the bathroom? SubhanAllah. Where do you start with this sort of question? What's going on? Well, my family is very anti-religious, and the only place that I can find peace is in the bathroom, so that's where I go to listen to the Quran. Why is your family anti-religious? And where they come from, there were some hardliners that messed up the faith of Islam, so the family is now anti-Islam, and so the young man wants to listen to Quran and he can't do it. But I like listening to Quran. That's great that you love to listen to Quran. When I listen to Quran, the voices stop. The voices stop when you stop listening to the Quran. The boy is going through a schizophrenic breakdown. I get on the phone with his mother. His mother is in denial on this whole thing. You know, there's a jinn in his body. There's a jinn in his body. No talk about schizophrenia. No talk about a mental illness for the boy. Okay, there's a jinn in the boy's body. Here's a sheikh that can help you. They go to the sheikh. The sheikh is like, there's maybe some of that, but he needs to see a psychiatrist. He needs to be on medication right now. Our youth are suffering. It's very hard. The issues that they're going through are just exponentially harder than what we went through right now. So the masjid has to be the oasis for them. There has to be something. You know, we give pizza out. You know, you're talking about the food being this great thing. We give pizza out because we want the youth to come directly from high school here. They're hungry. Have some pizza before the drama begins. And we do this. You have to do whatever means necessary because these kids are being accosted from every direction from things. Yeah. And we're just seeing the ones that are at the masjid that are talking about these issues. When in this room, we had a youth speaker come up. How many of you have had somebody give you pornography this week? 80%. How many of you have had somebody that's told you about drugs or try to offer you drugs this one? 42%, 50% of the hands went up. So the numbers are there. We share these numbers with the parents. The parents are shocked. Oh my, I have no idea it was this bad in the public schools. We are in a very good area. The reason we moved to this area is because of the schools. It's happening all over the place.
I agree. And then the other thing is, if a Muslim youth does try that, does fall into it, that's what tawbah's for. Like I think there was another study, more than half of Muslim youth tried alcohol and premarital sex within their first year of college. And then their second year of college, they come to me and they're like, it wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. And I'm like, no, it's really not. Let's talk about it. Also, this notion that like, oh, I've committed a sin that I can never come back. What sin do you think can possibly be anywhere near the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There's nothing. Just come back. Anything you've done, I promise, it's not as bad as you even think it is. Just do your tawbah and come back. Let's have the conversation. SubhanAllah. Can I say something about the women? I really feel like I need to plug the women. There's so many women, Muslim women, that are leaving traditional Islam because they're being told junk about it. They're being told so much junk. And it's just like, Dr. Amr talks about this. He says the shaitan doesn't have any of his own light. So what he does, it's like shadow puppets, where he tries to make something appear that it's not. Almost every masjid I've been to, they're like, this is the rights of your husband. The wife has rights too. There are an equal number of ahadith. But if you present half the story, what are you doing? You're misrepresenting the Prophet ﷺ. There's so many women that are leaving traditional Islam because they know when they're being lied to. And we're insulting their intelligence and telling them, no, you can't be here. You can't speak in the masjid. How many examples of women speaking in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, not just speaking, taking political authority in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. After the conquest of Mecca, everyone in Mecca was safe, except for a short less than 10 war criminals. One of them walked into the house of Hana radiallahu anha, and she said, I am giving him protection. She gave protection to a war criminal, and the Prophet ﷺ affirmed her and said, قَدْ أَجَرْنَا مَنْ أَجَرْتِ يَا Hana. We give protection to the person you gave protection to. You don't have to be the strongest person, because before, if you have armor, if you have men in your family, then you have power. And a woman inherently doesn't have power. And now the Prophet ﷺ saying this woman has power to say, I'm protecting a war criminal, we're going to have a conversation with him. And the fights that happened, I remember we had another scholar came in, our masjid kept arguing over halal meat. And he's like, the whole point of halal is honoring the animal you're about to kill and eat. You're really going to disrespect your Muslim brother or sister over, that makes no sense. Accommodate each other. Be kind to each other. These are actual parts of our religion, subhanAllah. I'm actually, when I see women that have stuck it out, I don't know about anyone, I don't know how many, have you ever been kicked out of a masjid? I hope not. I usually ask this in a crowd, and then I'm like, how many people have been kicked out of a masjid? Without fail, the majority of the women and the majority of the black people raise their hands. I had one guy, he was a young man, and he was young brown man to be stereotypical, and then he raised his hand too. I'm like, no way, why? What happened? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get this happy. And then I was just so shocked. And then he's like, oh, my shorts were too short. And I was like, oh yeah, they do that too. You're yelling at the person that's in the masjid. The vast majority of them didn't come to the masjid. So why are you yelling at the people in the masjid? They're actually doing it right. They're here. And for each one of those experiences, if we overwhelm people with love, I think statistically it's 9 positive experiences for every 1 negative experience. I don't know if we can get rid of every single racist that can ever show up to the masjid. But if every single black person that walked through the masjid had at least 9 other people they could point to, for every 1 idiot that said something that was racist, they would still feel like they belonged at the masjid. They would recognize that that person's wrong, and it becomes everybody's responsibility to correct that person. It's not their job. It's everybody's job to do it. I know I ranted.
No, rants are good. So I think, we talked about the mercy of Allah, mashallah. There was one youth that came. What is a soul? What is a soul? This is a youth, after the khutbah, comes to one of the scholars, what is a soul? He didn't know that there's a soul inside of him, and this body is a mechanism that we're using, a vehicle that we're using, and the soul will be going on after this. We just need to go to the basics with some of these youth. Subhanallah. I remember as a youth, sitting in the masjid, I didn't know about the mercy of Allah till I got to high school probably. I knew God as this angry uncle who was waiting to cut me down until I did something wrong. I remember thinking, when I was probably 13 or 14, and thinking, oh man, I'm going to hell anyway. Because haram was being used all the time for everything. You're not listening to your parents, haram. And you heard it at home, heard it at the masjid. I'm not going to hell anyway. I might as well just live it up. And I remember having this thought. And may Allah bless him, I don't know who it was, but I remember there was a speaker that came from out of town from Oklahoma. And he came to our masjid, and he talked about Allah's mercy. And my jaw dropped. I remember that khutbah. I was probably 15 or 16, sitting there. That's why I think the khutbahs are so important, that they have to be relevant. I'm like, subhanAllah, Allah's mercy. Allah loves me? I didn't know He loves me. Having this epitome at that age, and that's why it's so critical. The mercy of Allah just needs to be taught over and over again, because some of the youth do not know that Allah is merciful. They know that Him that's been weaponized for what it is. And, the mercy of Allah that forgives shirk. There's a man who made a little idol, and he didn't name it Allah, but he named it something similar to Allah. Every day, 100 times, he would say that name of the idol over and over again. And then one day his tongue slipped, and he accidentally called Allah's name. Allah came running. The angel said, Allah, he said your name by accident. He was saying the name of his idol. You don't understand, Allah said to his angels. If this person just one time had called on me in a genuine way, I would have forgiven all that. And that's shirk, that's up here. What have we done that's so bad? And you tell these youth this, and they would tell me more about Allah's mercy. And you tell them about, there's a man, and his bad deeds will be good more than his good deeds, and Allah will tell him to go to heaven. And the man will be confused and say, what? My bad deeds are more than my good deeds. Why am I going to heaven? Allah will remind the man, there was one day that you were on earth, and you were in bed, and you had trouble falling asleep, so you were tossing and turning. And out of frustration, you said, Allah, and then you turned to the other side and you fell asleep. And you forgot about that night. But your Lord, He never sleeps, He never forgets. And because of that, one ya Allah, you have heaven. It's one good deed to God's liking. I was just, 2 days ago, I was talking with a new Muslim, and I was just telling anecdote. He was like a child. He's a 30-year-old man. Tell me one more. Tell me one more. People are thirsting for this faith. Just thirsting for this faith. And we're holding it back like it's a treasure that if we give it away, it'll be lesser than us. It just increases. And that's why the masjids have to be that spot. And I tell the story again and again about how my life changed while I was sitting in masjid, where I decided, this is what I want to do with my life, because I heard about the mercy of Allah. So may Allah bless our masjids and help us all. We're coming up on Isha time. So may Allah bless everybody who's tuned in and joined us here. May Allah bless Dr. Amina for your insights. And
Really, may Allah reward everyone that has ever put an ounce of energy towards a masjid. May Allah accept it from them. May Allah give them 100 masajid and homes in Jannah for every second that they put in, subhanAllah. Again, when we think of the masjid, we always are like, honor the legacy of the masjid. Who donated? No, who put in blood, sweat, and tears? I I remember we were grad students. I didn't have money to donate. I showed up to the fundraiser. I just thought it was hilarious. I was like, I don't know why I'm here. I put on like 20 hours a week. There was actually a moment where I was like, maybe I should quit the PhD program. I'm in the masjid more than the PhD program. My parents were not happy with that decision, but alhamdulillah. May Allah reward everyone. It's special time. Jazakallah khairan. Please come hang out with us once COVID ends.
inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
أخي